time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go!
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, and we're the pot.
Welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod. I'm your host, Josh, and we have our co-host, Blake, joining us in the cantina today, chatting all about Star Wars missed opportunities. This is an interesting subject because I'm sure a lot of you would agree that there's been times where a particular director or writer or actor may have had the chance to do something in the stories, and it just didn't happen. And this spans from comic books to novels to shows to films. And Blake and I each have a list of our own, which we're going to go through. So let's hop over to the cantina and have this discussion.
Another happy landing.
Well, we are we're standing just outside the cantina. Let's go in and take a look.
Oh wow!
There we are.
Oh wow! Look at the place. It's just like I remember.
It's bustling, man. It's bustling. Let's go grab a table.
Oh, there's Greedo over there. Let's avoid him. I don't trust him.
Greasy, green, slimy dude. All right.
McClunky.
McClunky. That's right. Man, this is a great topic. I've been looking forward to this for a while. And, lots of missed opportunities in Star Wars. I think we can all agree on that one.
From big to small. I know a lot of the smaller ones, they only ever come to me when I'm watching the movies.
Yeah.
I'm like, they've just done that a little bit differently.
Yeah, exactly. It's just that little itch. You watch whatever you're watching and reading whatever you're reading, whatever. And you're like, oh, if they only just tweaked it just a little bit, or they threw this in there to spice it up, or whatever, and it came so close, just to whatever they're trying to achieve, and we're going to be going over a list of those things today. Some of them, at least on my list, tend to be a mix of both things like that and possibly subjects that we've talked about before in previous other subjected episodes, like some things that may have been canceled last minute that were almost a reality. Not a huge list on that.
We've talked about those before.
Yeah, exactly. And then some things are right down to a particular line in the script or anything like that. And I know you got a few on your end as well. We don't really know what each of us have written about, but I'm sure we might have like one or two that line up.
Yeah, I'm guessing so.
Yeah. So without further ado, let's just start with do you want to kick us off here? What's the top of your list?
Well, this is probably the biggest one for me. I'm gonna start with the hammered home. Try to save the biggest one to the end.
Let's just start off light and kind of ease into it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we've been on a Boba train, so we'll start with that. We never got any episodes or even stories of Boba actually being trained by Cad Bane.
Right. Yeah. So that was a big missed opportunity for sure, because I guess there was that Clone Wars arc that was planned out.
And we've talked about showreels even recently.
Yeah, recently actually.
They showed the duel, but we never see any of the buildup of their relationship before that. Totally. So now, even going into the Boba Fett series, we're kind of alluded to the fact that there's a relationship there, but we really have no idea what it is.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know for sure whether or not we'll ever even get those story arcs. I'm sure maybe they might have a plan to release them at some point. With some of the unproduced Clone Wars episodes, they ended up adapting them into a comic book or a novel. And then, of course, some of the episodes were in fact finished and produced as season 7 episodes. But there's still like a whole of 20 something that remain completely untouched, other than a few proxy animation segments here and there. And
At the moment, I think all of those could be considered missed opportunity.
oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. That for sure. That's just what I was about to expand on. Anything in regards to any canceled Clone Wars story arc, which would have given us like a story like that, or whatever that we knew that was confirmed to be a thing, was a huge missed opportunity, because Clone Wars just canceled. It just ended too early, and it was a mistake on Disney's behalf. I think they kind of admitted that when they brought Clone Wars back. It's very rare that any show crawls its way back from the canceled grave, and
it's true.
When it does, I mean, it's like, dude, like this is, it was just as good as I remember, if not better,
Yeah.
And
it's fun. It's kind of the story that happened to Firefly too. Same thing. They canceled it. Years later, they were given the opportunity to finish the story with a movie. Right. This was Clone Wars, is obviously like a handful of episodes as opposed to a film, but still.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Serenity capped it off, and that title still kind of lives on in the form of novels and graphic comic books, and it's a title that kind of has that pop culture following, and the continuity is there. There was a novel of recently that came out within the last like 2 or 3 years that was still set within that time frame. It's
such a cool designed universe.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that it's carried on. I know there's a big following of all the brown coats out there. I'll shout out. And honestly, because I know I've always been a big fan. So I'm just holding out hope that now that Disney owns Fox, maybe we'll get like a mini series or something, even if it's not the original cast, just something in that universe.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you bring up. It's funny that you bring up that show, because, of course, now with Fox being owned by Disney, this now kind of rests on Disney's shoulders for responsibility for bringing it back if it does come back. So
they can't handle it worse than Fox, honestly.
Yeah. But yeah, Clone Wars. I mean, you got one of the ones that was on my list at least. So there you have it. Missed opportunity with all those canceled story arcs. I'll nail out a second one for you. So I don't have them in any particular order, just because I got like a few of them. So I'm gonna just kind of pick out here and there. But this one itches me every single time, and I've told you this before. I've told other people this before. It was a missed opportunity in episode 3 with Anakin's line that he says to Obi-Wan. Let me just play it for you here.
Don't make me kill you.
All right, so that's Anakin right before he leaps at Obi-Wan, and I always thought, man, that's a missed opportunity, because if they just wrote it a little differently, they could have had it like this.
Don't make me destroy you.
And
They're so close.
It's the same guy, right? It's the same character. And the line's just like one word difference, and it would have been so awesome, because this is like the turning point for Anakin into Vader, and that's such an iconic line in itself, right? Like people walk around the street and go, "Don't make me destroy you," if they're pulling a joke and saying something to their buddies or whatever, referencing Star Wars. That's just one of the reference lines, right?
For sure.
Yeah, it's like
it's so close that it makes me just wonder if they screwed up.
It makes you sick. It's like, man, it's like one word off. It's like they couldn't just like retake it.
I don't know who screwed up though. Like, was it the writer? Like, if it was George who did it or whoever, like just would misremember the line, or do you think that Hayden Christensen just screwed up the line on set?
I don't know. I mean, I would. That's a question.
It's so close.
It's like, so close.
It really could be either.
Yeah, and that's what I'm wondering too. Like, I'm wondering if George is so nonchalant about the specifics of things that maybe it was written as "destroy you," and then he just kind of changed it up himself. And
yeah, maybe he didn't think it was menacing enough. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But it confuses me every time, because I'm like, it just baffles me. Like, why not? That's a big one. It's such a small thing, but it's such a big moment. And that's what makes it a big thing for me. So that's a missed opportunity right there.
A lot of those, I feel like a lot of my gripes too are stuff that, at least in the main saga, stuff that could have been just slightly tweaked that would make all three trilogies just sync up a little bit better.
Yeah, for sure. I've got a few
And
of those.
my
as
biggest
well.
one, my biggest one falls under that as well.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. Kick us off with another one here.
I thought it was a missed opportunity that the sequels didn't use 3PO and R2 as much as the previous two trilogies did. Like, I feel like R2 really got stuck with a back seat, just being turned off, holding the map for like the entire first movie, for example.
Yeah, that's a big one. I forget if I don't have that one on my list, but I did have a few from the sequels in there, of course, naturally. I think we all would.
Because it breaks the original story of how George said it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be from the droid's perspective, because that's why they're in all 6 movies, at least
Right.
original films.
Exactly. Yeah. That was something that George was pretty adamant about, where, and his ideas have evolved. I mean, it's not that stories can't evolve from storytellers, but George was the kind of guy that kept things fairly consistent, as he evolved things, telling his story over the course of, 30 something plus years.
Yep.
And the droids were definitely one of those definitive things that he said in more recent periods of time. When he completed his saga, he said, that the droids were there for all these big events, right? And so if someone were to share the story, because every movie opens up with a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, right? That's not just like a throwaway line. It is truly supposed to be us recounting a story that has happened, right? And so it's almost like a fairy tale. You read once upon a time, right? And it's basically like his way of kind of saying, this story is we're approaching this from like a mythological standpoint, right? In which this story has been recounted by people over and over again throughout history. And there was someone must have been there to witness that story. And so to George, that was ultimately the droids, because they don't die. They somehow live through everything throughout the films. And
we've seen 3PO tell stories before, such as Return of the Jedi.
Right, exactly. And he's got such a cool character arc, because in A New Hope, he says that they're not very good at telling stories. And then you get to the final film where he's telling the stories.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a good... He's got his own character arc through the original trilogy, which is actually really neat. And, when he first meets Luke Skywalker and he asks him about the rebellion and the Empire, 3PO's like, oh, well, we're not much for telling stories. And he tries to shrug it off. And then in episode 6, he's actually responsible for making them part of the tribe, because he tells blows them all away. All these little Ewoks that tell him the greatest story of all time, being the Star Wars. And I always thought that was such a neat little part of the story that I think goes a little underlooked. But there was another thing with the storytelling that is not just the droids, but it was supposed to also involve the wills of the Force. And I think if George did have the opportunity to do the sequel trilogy, he would have gone down that route and incorporated those wills a lot more, which in itself was a bit of a missed opportunity. We didn't get that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that was a really big one for sure.
I think it's one of the things that made the sequels feel really out of sync.
Yeah.
And I get the fact that, it was the new droid, right? BB-8, they want to like more center stage, but it's not to say you couldn't have the other two being more involved, right? Or like or at least 3PO, have him become part of the crew again, because they didn't have an interpreter at all.
Yeah, I guess they kind of tried to amend that up a little bit in episode 9, because he was a lot more present, shall we say. But R2, man, like, he got the brunt of a lot of that.
Crazy.
That cut.
They were very, very involved through all other 6 movies.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I get they need to make new stuff, right? It's not that you and I are completely wrapped up in, the stuff that exists through 6 movies and we don't want to see new things. Like, of course, we want to see new things, but we want to make sure it's consistent. And
that's like, what it is for me.
Yeah, it's like, I understand them wanting to make new droids. They can sell new toys. It's like, printing money for them, you know? Make a new BB-8, just make it black, boom. You know, a whole new action figure, whole new Funko Pop, whole new wall sticker, everything else, you know, 6-inch figure, 3 3/4 inch figure, the list goes on, right? And
yeah, you got mold busts, you got them driving destroyed AT-ATs, you name it.
Yeah. So anyone from the corporate world listening, I'm like, you know, I get it, right? Like, it's not that I don't understand. This is ultimately, for them, it's about money. But quite frankly, I mean, you know, servicing the story is really important because, you know, that's why we love the thing in the first place, right? And it's like, it's okay. It's Star Wars. You can use R2-D2. You know, it's like you didn't pay $4 billion for nothing.
It's really bizarre how that is the case. I feel like maybe they're just trying to distance themselves from George. They could feel like it was their idea.
I think so.
But
yeah,
it
doesn't work.
No, it just makes everything feel disconnected.
Yeah, it does. It's not that I don't have a problem with BB-8, but I did have a problem with how much he was overused through all of the movies in that trilogy, over the use of a very capable and useful droid, which is R2-D2, you know? And
like, I don't know why they couldn't have done both. Like, for example, let's say 7 will be pretty much the same because like they all have their jobs or whatever. Don't change the story too much. But after R2 is reawakened and BB-8 and Poe are reunited, BB-8 could have went back with Poe, but just as involved in the series, and then R2 could have replaced BB-8 with Rey.
Right. Yeah, possibly, for sure.
And then you'd have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah. And you know, and I sometimes think about this.
Because she basically just steals his droid. He doesn't get it back.
Yeah, yeah, totally. You know, and that being said, I mean, I know Episode 3 is a little notorious for the cutting of a lot of R2-3PO moments, just because that movie is so busy with other stuff that the droids definitely ended up getting, I think, the least amount of screen time than any other Star Wars movie, and that's happens to be my favorite Star Wars movie. So it's not that I'm forgetting about that either, but it's not intentional, is what I'm trying to say. You know, like if the movie was 3 or 4 hours, I'm sure we would have had more R2 and 3PO. You know, quite frankly, it wasn't. But you know, when you look at like 3 whole Star Wars movies that, you know, the lackluster time of those characters is like next to none. It's like, okay, what on earth happened? You know? So it's true. Big missed opportunity there. Shame on them.
Shame.
Here's a big one for me. Anakin is not visible in the sequels at all. And this is a big missed opportunity because with the special editions and then later the Blu-ray releases and it was apparent that the canonicity of Anakin looking like Hayden Christensen after he dies is just the thing, right? Like that's just the way it goes. He was redeemed to his former glory, his highest point in his life. And that's how George wanted to...
stuck as an old man.
yeah. And that's how George wanted to portray the identity of Anakin Skywalker, because they emphasize that a little bit, where it's not resurrection or it's not Force Ghost, that is. It's not exactly what you would consider of immortality in a way. I mean, it kind of is and it kind of isn't. It's emphasized in Clone Wars as maintaining one's identity after death, because we all know that everyone who dies in Star Wars transcends into the Force, right? So in a way,
well, you also now we know you keep the ability to bonk people in the head with sticks and summon lightning.
yeah, that's a nice added perk, I guess. But I mean, yeah, it's like you maintain the identity of yourself, which you can, I guess, and you exist outside of time. So it's kind of this weird, like you exist as part of the Force, but you maintain your identity, because to someone like Ezra Bridger, who ends up in the world between worlds, you know, it's obvious that time is no longer relevant in the Force. You know, time just doesn't exist. It's like gravity, right? It's like if you've ever seen that movie Interstellar, you know, And you know, it's just to me, it's like Force Ghosts. They don't just kind of pop on, pop off whenever they want. I think it's just the Force allows them to kind of be there in that moment for the person in need at all times, because time no longer exists once you kind of transcend that death curtain, right? So now we're getting into like hugely Star Wars philosophy stuff, but I mean, like that's just kind of how I perceived the whole Force Ghost thing, and that once they really emphasize, like, you know, this is the identity of yourself after death. So young Anakin showing up, episode 6, that's how it ends. You go to episode 7, no Force Ghosts, no nothing. At the same time, we didn't really get any Luke anyway, so yeah. But in episode 8, when he's like struggling, right? Yoda is the last person I would have expected, or maybe actually not the last one, but you know, with his father being present now in his life, and
it should have been all three of them.
It should have been all three.
Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Yoda.
Ideally, he would have been confronted by like a Force Ghost of council, a Force Ghost like kind Force of thing. Council. Yeah, the Force Council kind of thing. What do you call that? Intervention. Yeah, Force
Which
Ghost
is really
intervention.
funny.
Yeah,
because one of the comics, when Luke is a Force Ghost, and it's like his great grandson or whatever, it's Cade Skywalker, and Luke as a Force Ghost is doing interventions for Cade because he's addicted to death sticks.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you know, it hasn't not been done before, but yeah, no, of course, like I wholeheartedly agree, and you know, it was a big missed opportunity not to use that character. And like, yeah, we got a little bone at the end of episode 9. You heard his voice, big deal, you know. Part of the reason why I'm so excited for Obi-Wan Kenobi is that we actually get to see him in character again, however way, shape, or form that is. And you know,
I wonder then if he will be in contact with Qui-Gon, because last we heard at the end of Revenge of the Sith, Yoda says, "In touch with your old master," or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So there might be something there as well.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Force Ghost training.
Exactly. Yeah.
I hadn't actually considered up till now.
Yeah, it's actually on my list. Qui-Gon's on my list in one or two areas. But yeah, Anakin, no Anakin in the sequels, aside from a little voice line, you know, big missed opportunity there. In fact, there's some guy on YouTube who kind of fixed that whole Rey scene where she gets back up and fights the Emperor, and actually kind of composited in all of the other Jedi that you see the voices of, like, behind her. And it was like, why couldn't they just do that? You know,
that's
like,
pretty cool. Like honestly, they should have done that to begin with.
Yeah, they should have just done that. You know, from the start, they should have just planned a scene that would have happened. And maybe it was time, maybe it was budget constraints. Who knows? But what do you got to lose? It's the last Star Wars movie that they're going to make in the saga. You know, as far as the Skywalker story goes, I just didn't get it. You know.
That actually plays right into one of mine, which is at the very finale of episode 9, they should have had all the Force Ghosts there.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the final farewell. Same idea as Return of the Jedi, but now like Luke and everyone is there too, right?
Right, yeah. And I know they wanted that. You're talking specifically about the moment where Rey is on Tatooine. She says, "I'm Rey Skywalker." The camera pans out. You see like the Luke and Leia Force Ghosts, kind of like her own parents standing there. And then that's it, right? You're talking about that scene? Yeah. Okay.
That's right. And all right. They should have also had Obi-Wan, and they should have had Anakin. It should have been like a final farewell moment, right?
It's funny that you mentioned that one, because something to add on top of that is they really emphasized that whole Rey-Ben Solo relationship at the end of the movie. And it blows me away.
Yeah, he should have been there too.
Yeah, it blows me away that he wasn't there. And I think a lot of people were a little bummed about that, because when I was in the theater, I remember thinking, is he going to pop up, right? And
just like Anakin did, right?
Right, so exactly.
He wanted to be so much like Darth Vader, and then he got the same story arc.
Yeah, and then he just got screwed, man. Like, you know, no Force Ghost for him. Like,
no,
I don't know.
He was still dark side, so he doesn't get to live on with the Force.
Maybe he didn't complete the training. You know?
Oh my gosh.
Well, who
I mean,
knows? Who knows?
Anakin probably didn't either. He just came back anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
He-
Well, he's
he
the
died and
chosen
came
one. I
back.
think he gets to do that, right? He's the chosen one. He lucks out, but
And the chosen one never shows up in this in the sequels.
yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It's just this strange kind of. I don't know why. You know, I don't know why they just didn't do it. So yeah, yours and mine kind of sync up a little bit. In that
It's a
area.
lot of Force Ghost stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I get that they don't want to overuse them because then everything's always solved all the time.
Right.
Things become too easy. But you can't just avoid them altogether either.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. They're a big part of Star Wars. I mean, you know, that's the only reason why Luke continued his training, you know, because of Obi-Wan coming to him in moments of need, and I think sometimes about Harry Potter, like in this one scene in Order of the Phoenix, where they're kind of the students kind of meet in Hogsmeade, and Hermione and Ron are kind of talking him up to a bunch of their fellow students, and they're like, Harry did this, Harry did that, Harry killed a basilisk, you know, Harry took on Dementors, you know, more than any wizard has seen before, whatever. He's, you know, ridden a hippogriff and like whatever, right?
Yeah.
Fought a
Look at
dragon.
his resume.
Yeah. And so he's fought Voldemort and all this and that.
Could you imagine being like 14 and like that's what you've done?
Yeah, I know, right? So I think of that scene though, because he kind of gets up when he's like looking at the floor when they're saying all these things, and he's like, "Well, that you'll make it sound really great, but you know, I didn't actually do a lot of those things by myself. Like I always had hope or help, right? He always had something that was intervening, right? Like Dumbledore's bird, like giving him the sword and the hat in the Chamber of Secrets, or you know, himself saving himself in front of the Dementors, or whatever, right? Like there's a whole bunch of if he didn't have the firebolt, he probably would have just been eaten by a freaking dragon, right? Like, you know, and he was gifted the firebolt. There's a lot of things where it's like, okay, if Harry didn't have the help that he needed at Hogwarts, he probably would have died like first or second year, you know? And I think to myself in moments like that, it's like Luke Skywalker would have never become a Jedi if it wasn't for Force ghosts. And
It's true.
Obi-Wan wouldn't have, you know, Obi-Wan and Yoda would have never made it to where they did as Force ghosts if it wasn't for Qui-Gon learning this particular route into the path to immortality, shall we say.
Yeah. So that's interesting that you mentioned Luke having like Obi-Wan as a Force ghost, and then later like Yoda and Anakin as well, because something that I didn't really realize until you brought that up is a pretty massive distinct difference between Rey and Luke's, like their arc in learning the Force, because Luke always has Obi-Wan to talk to and learn from, whereas Rey just kind of learns stuff. And that's something that could have been very easily fixed if they just included a Force Ghost.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And you know, it's not like Luke didn't use a lightsaber at all aside from that training droid in episode 4. Whereas in episode 7, Rey's like already taking on a dark
Sith,
Jedi,
a
right?
Sith Lord.
Yeah, and I mean technically he's like a dark Jedi because like the Sith are supposed to be gone or whatever, but
Right.
but
Well-
they emphasize that a lot, and then they brought him back anyways, Palpatine. But whatever,
Exactly.
whatever, right? But
That was his plan all along. Throw
Yeah.
them off.
yeah, so but you're right. It's just it's like what, and which is it also brings into that whole thing. Was like, okay, well, you know, she ends up being a Palpatine. This explains everything. It explains why she's so naturally gifted. All this, like, you know,
Which is bizarre because they just spent the entire last movie talking about how bloodlines don't matter.
yeah. This is a whole nother thing, man. The whole sequel, like, directions. But yeah,
I don't want to just like
big
not,
missed
like,
opportunity. Big missed
complain
opportunity.
about that the whole time, but there's a lot of stuff that if it just been tweaked, would have been a lot smoother.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Force Ghost is a big one. Yeah, speaking of, see, I got a few more of the sequels. I don't want to ham on these movies, but
Yeah, I was trying to avoid that too.
let me just say very quickly because it is on my list. Episode 7, all of it. I know, I know some people out there they might hate episode 8 and 9 and love episode 7. To me, episode 7 felt like an empty shell of a Star Wars movie. I remember walking out of that theater and going, "This didn't feel like Star Wars at all." Other than the music and seeing the Falcon again and some cameos from Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill, it was really just like, what is this movie? Like it's so disconnected from the last episode. You know, like I remember just watching a bunch of Ewoks take down the Empire, Force Ghost showing up and Luke Skywalker standing around a campfire, and now like what is this? Like, you know, I was just so confused. And I know it's like 20 something years later.
From that perspective, that is a good point. If you just change the names of stuff, then it could be any sci-fi movie. It could be like Valerian or something, right?
Yeah, and it's like you know, with episode 4 and with episode 3, at least you have that solid transition of Luke and Leia are born. And now you start off the next movie with Luke and Leia. And it's like easy transition, right? And there's like a 19-year difference between those movies in universe. Episode 6 and 7, I don't know what happened, man.
So I think part of it then is maybe they tried to change too much in that gap. So
yeah, I think so.
Would have been happier if, say, Luke's like his academy was like still active, like that sort of, like it started with a tragedy of that.
Yeah. The missed opportunity really comes into how they handled that story ultimately, because we do know that episode 7 was supposed to be written by somebody else, and under the creative consulting of George Lucas, you know, having used that outline when he sold the company. They had an outline for episode 7, 8, and 9. And some notes, some artwork, you know, they had a rough script. It could have been a very different movie, you know, and I think if we had that version of episode 7, it would have actually lined up so much better. And there would have been this continuous, consistent trajectory of like where, you know, Mr. Lucas himself would have taken the stories. And that I think is the biggest missed opportunity of all. Is it all goes back to that decision that was made all the way back then. Do we scrap what Lucas is doing in favor of going a completely different direction? And ultimately it comes back to that a lot of the time. A lot of the issues from the sequels always go back to that. So
no, it's a valid point.
Big missed opportunity. Yeah.
I get their decision in that, whereas like this is right off the prequels of it's the last Star Wars that have come out, barring the Clone Wars. And fans, when the prequels came out, had a absolutely terrible reaction to it.
Yeah.
Like,
I think they were afraid of that.
Exactly. And so like that's not to say like kids didn't enjoy it, because I mean we grew up in that generation, we grew up with it, so we always liked the prequels.
Yeah.
But the original trilogy fans who watched the prequels, I don't think there was very many people who were at least very outspoken about liking it. There's a lot of hatred from that generation towards them, at least in the early few years. And I would say probably up to the point where Disney started putting stuff out. And I could see them wanting to avoid that, worrying that there's just a lot of baggage there, right? Yeah. But unfortunately, they probably went too far the other way. And because a lot of the flaws of the prequels aren't the story itself. It's that they weren't executed to their full potential.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a huge amount of potential when you say there's going to be a Star Wars 7, 8, and 9. And I remember thinking to myself, I remember telling somebody this at a SkyTrain station when I was waiting in line, you know, on the way to work, coworker of mine. I remember saying to him, Episode 7 is going to be the best Star Wars movie of all time. And critically, it's done pretty well, and it made a lot of money.
It looks really nice.
But I said to him, and this is before we had any kind of teaser trailer or anything like that. This was like the news had come out. This was going to happen. everyone was stoked. And I remember saying to him, this is going to be the best Star Wars movie of all time, because they have the opportunity to combine the cast of the prequels and the sequels in one movie. You know, this is the moment where you can dress Ewan McGregor up like.
I brought in
man.
neither of them.
Yeah, and it's like you got the opportunity to dress up Ewan McGregor as an old man, play old Obi-Wan Kenobi. You can throw in Hayden Christensen in there, have Ghost Anakin, right? You know, we get Mark Hamill's Luke Skywalker again. You get the band back together. Carrie was still alive. It was too perfect, right? And it just kind of fell apart so fast. As soon as they threw out that rough outline from George, it just went downhill quick. And I think it's episode 7 that really sets up what episode 8 was going to do. And ultimately, like, yeah, they could have done more changes to make that movie work better. But it was really like this time and era that we're in with this particular villain and this particular government that's coming into the galaxy as a new threat and this and that and whatever. The state of the galaxy was just a bad way to set up that trilogy of films. And I've just kind of maintained that thought for close to 8 years now.
Has it been that long?
I don't know. Well, I mean, since I guess I'm going back from before the first movie, but I guess it's been 7 years? 2015 was Force Awakens. Seven years, I guess.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't think it's been that long.
Yeah, we're coming on 8 years.
People are still bitter, like it's the prequels all over again.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, you did touch on it though, so I feel like it needs at least a brief mention. I don't want us to stick on sequels for too long, but it's worth saying that a missed opportunity that we can never now have is the original trilogy cast being reunited.
Yeah, for sure. That's no longer a possibility, you know, with the loss of Carrie and even Peter Mayhew. I mean, the actor behind the Chewbacca mask, even he's gone. And Kenny Baker as R2-D2. I mean, he's had some honorary mentions here and there, but he's gone as well. And there's pretty much, it's just Anthony Daniels, Mark and Harrison. And you know, that's and Billy D, of course, if you count Lando. That's who's left, right? And it's like time's ticking, man. Like they're all going to be gone soon. It's crazy. So
and James Earl Jones as well. Throw him in there.
Yeah. James Earl Jones, Vader. That's a very good one. How many times are we going to get the authentic Vader voice going forward with Disney? Probably not very many. Yeah, I think this might be one of the last times we get Vader. Like real Vader, you know, in Obi-Wan Kenobi, is because
that's actually a really good point. Yeah.
And in the games and stuff, you can always tell it sounds different. You know, you can always tell it's somebody else. And sometimes they do a pretty good job. But even in Star Wars Rebels, they had James Earl Jones reprise his role for that. Rogue One, he came back for that. You know, and it's like, man, this guy's been the voice of Vader iconically since '77. Like, what are we going to do without him? Right? I mean,
such a good point. It's all those things that just allow everything to feel consistent, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
it's the subtle things.
It's the subtle things for sure. Here's a big one for me: Obi-Wan's forgetfulness of R2 in the prequels. I have no answer for this. There's a huge missed opportunity in the prequels for not connecting the dots when it comes to Obi-Wan not knowing R2-D2 in episode 4. And I never understood that. I never understood how he could spend all these years at the side of Anakin in the Clone Wars with his droid R2-D2. There's an entire arc where he was scolding Anakin for going out and trying to find this little droid that he loved so much. And it's like, how do you not remember this droid? Like, you know, this droid has been...
the droid that saved them as they escaped.
Yeah, like Naboo. So many times. Nice work.
Specific droid. Yeah. I don't know. They all look the same to me.
Yeah, there was this article I read online about these various things that just paint Obi-Wan as like a total liar in like every scenario, and it's really funny. It's so funny, yeah. And his excuse every time is just, well, from a certain point of view, wink, wink. Next time I'm caught lying, I'm gonna say that. Well, from a certain point of view.
Oh my gosh. Should run for mayor.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good point, though. Like, I know that George. I feel like he kind of tried to make it seem like most people can't tell the difference between droids, including Obi-Wan, where like they're basically like a toaster,
Right.
right? They shouldn't be treated any differently than a toaster, which is funny because all the main characters, they all don't do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like again, like in the sequels, all of them treat like BB-8 like he's a champion hero or whatever, right? But it's supposed to be that the majority of people just see them as like tools.
Right, exactly.
And Luke and Anakin were the only exception.
Yeah, it's true. It's a good point.
And
Obi-Wan
and
never
Padme
valued.
just
Yeah,
and Padme to some degree.
right. Yeah. And Leia, Leia's thrown in there as well
I don't
with
I don't know. I feel like Han and Leia both still treated 3PO like he was just like a robot, like a regular droid, right? Or
Well,
just,
well,
like, someone-
with 3PO, yeah. With R2, I mean, like Leia entrusted R2 with the plans, the secret plans to the Death Star, which is a huge big deal because the
Yeah, but that
sacrifice
wasn't
behind
that wasn't because they saw them as something that wasn't just a tool, right? That was because sorry, getting my words all fumbled here. I could see them doing that if it was any droid because that would be just a function that they're supposed to carry out, and they knew that's something that would be able to sneak through. That has nothing to do with Leia thinking that R2 was a special hero character. In fact, she'd probably never seen R2 like 101 before. He probably was just there coincidentally because
Well,
he was supposed to just work for Captain Antilles.
yeah, and he was kind of, I guess maybe. Well, we know from Rebels that Bail Organa basically took ownership of those droids. So Leia's grown up around those droids. So if she did look at them as tools, you know,
3PO specifically says our last owner was Captain Antilles.
our last master. So I guess maybe when Leia started working for the rebellion, 3PO just, his immediate kind of person of command was passed off to the captain of that ship, because he was entrusted with delivering Leia to Obi-Wan, right? I guess in person. So, that kind of makes sense, I guess, from a certain point of view. But no, in Rebels, we had kind of clear distinction. Along with Leia's adoption, like R2 and 3PO were kind of passed off to Bail as a primary kind of master that they would go to. And then when he died, obviously on Alderaan, that ownership kind of goes to Leia. So, yeah. But anyway, long-winded thing. I forget what we're talking about. Okay, so yeah, the forgetfulness of Obi-Wan. I feel like if they just had a little throwaway line in episode 3 or something, I don't know how cheesy it would have been, but maybe something that kind of indicated like he just doesn't care at all. Doesn't care at all for R2 as an identity of a droid, or anything like that kind of distincted him from any other droid, or something that kind of pointed out, it's like, because he says, I don't remember owning a droid. It's like,
Yeah.
Some
Quite
just
distinctly.
schmoes like, hey sir, is this your droid? Like, no, anything like that would have been kind of like a little nod, I guess. But I think it's almost inevitable, when you start making a story halfway through the story, it's almost inevitable that those kind of things are going to happen, right?
Yeah, the small stuff, just because it changes over time.
Yeah, exactly. Which just goes to show how impressive the construction of George's saga really is, and how consistent of a story he had in his head before he started making the middle one, because that's a tough thing to do, It's a really tough thing to do. I mean, I know Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them has been running into all those kind of issues with continuity stuff in relation to in-universe lore that they've already done in the Harry Potter films and books and such. So
That's true. Yeah, and those are novels, so they had a much richer
yeah,
canonicity to pull from. So whereas the films feel like there's a little more room, like wiggle room, because stuff is less like nailed down.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of which, new movie's coming out this weekend, so yeah. I'm stoked.
Harry Potter, not Star Wars.
Yeah, Harry Potter. Yeah, I'm like, give everyone a heart attack. You're like, what Star Wars movie?
What? Obi-Wan's coming out already?
No way. Okay, 1313. This is I know this is kind of like on our it's a number one on our canceled Star Wars list. But I got to throw it out there because the missed opportunity comes in with how close it was to finished. I mean, we're talking about a game that had a full E3 launch, which means it's about a year and a half ish away from release, right? At least nowadays, E3 happens, a game is announced, you kind of forget about it, and then 4 years later it comes out. Like Lego Star Wars. But this is a game that was, I assume, like really close to finish, and it's still just in its coffin, you know, not seeing the light of day, probably never will. Big missed opportunity there. It was also a missed opportunity to once again tell a story of a young Boba Fett that just didn't happen. This is one of 3 times if you count the Clone Wars canceled Clone Wars episodes 1313, as well as the canceled Boba Fett movie, which ended up, I guess, as an idea being transformed into a show. That's like a lot of misfires, I think, when it comes to telling stories about that particular character. So yeah, big
He's obviously changed a lot since those days too. Now they've decided to make him a crime lord.
Yeah. I'm the crime lord now.
That's right. So I got a neat one.
Go for it.
Something that some people maybe like it the way it is. And I'm not gonna say that it's not good the way it is, because I enjoy it the way it is too. But it would have been really cool to see the original episode 6 on Kashyyyk with all the Wookiees instead of the Ewoks.
That would have been interesting. Like a second battle of Kashyyyk kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is also before Kashyyyk was a thing in the Clone Wars, right? So
you're not far off. I mean, like,
I think that sorry.
Yeah, well, that's that's not far off of what could have happened, because it was too expensive or something like that to do.
Yeah,
Wookiee
that's
suits.
exactly what it was.
Yeah.
That's the reason why they didn't do it. But actually, it happening because they put it in the prequels as like this was something George wanted to do, so it's like they finally got to do it.
Yeah.
But being in the prequels actually might make it richer to come back to in the sequels, because then you're liberating all these Wookiee slaves after you saw them be like fight with the Republic and then be betrayed.
Right. Yeah.
That'd be a really cool turn of events. And honestly, the reason why I think I'd like to see it and be really cool is I would just love to see like the style of combat that we get in the original trilogy in Return of the Jedi. We get like we see all the Ewoks have all got their spears and they're like fighting everything kind of like hands on.
Yeah.
I would love to see that with just the brutality of Wookiees.
Yeah.
Because we see them fight in Revenge of the Sith, but it's always like a really quick shot or like a wide angle. You never really get to actually see the battle itself.
Right. Yeah. The whole thing is like you can see whatever they're doing in a matter of like 12 or 15 seconds worth of footage, and that's it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I think the only real combat we see where they're actually fighting is when they take out those tanks.
Yeah, in the water.
Put the grenades on there and jump off. Yeah. Other than that, it's like the two sides are running at each other to start the fight, or they're like flying by on one of their like airship things.
Yeah, and there's like the initial beach kind of like roar, you know, the battle cry, and then yeah, and that's it, right? It's like, man, that would be so like, cool though, you know, to see more of that.
Yeah, like just seeing them like actually like attacking the like stormtroopers and like tearing them apart, or like climbing. I picture them like climbing up the trees, like how you see the like the orcs and the goblins escape when the Balrog shows up.
Yeah.
In Lord of the Rings, like I picture like you hear like the Empire, whatever, shows up like the ATST, and then you just see all the Wookiees like scatter, climb up the trees,
Yeah, that'd be
like stuff like that would be so cool.
Yeah, it's like I do like it is a missed opportunity for sure. Again, I think it comes back to the order of how these movies were made. If the original trilogy was made today, man, that's an interesting conversation in itself. But yeah, it is kind of a missed opportunity not to have had that happen. I guess for the time, I understand why it didn't happen, and I think George's mentality is like, if you can't do it well, don't do it. Because
For sure,
he's like pushing for the best thing possible, right? And he was such an innovator in terms of like wanting something beyond what was proven capable at least at the time, right? And so here we are, right? I mean, the guy basically revolutionized the industry on a few accounts. So yeah, I mean, that's one for sure that I would have loved to have seen as well.
just would have been so cool.
It would have been.
Anyway, what else you got?
Okay, well, I think I brought up Qui-Gon in episode 3. Maybe it came up briefly, but I just want to throw it because it's a whole separate thing. I got no Qui-Gon in episode 3 was a big setback. I think in terms of this all goes back to our Force Ghost conversation. We'll speed through this a little bit. We got here's a big one. Leia's memory of Padme. Took an obscure novel moment to piece together that she was actually thinking of Sabe. And it was like a missed memory that, how sometimes our memories get a little distorted over time. That's
such a bizarre fix.
Yeah, it was a bizarre fix, but it was something of a patch at least. However, it always did kind of confuse me. The route that George decided to take with Padme dying at the death of the twins' birth. I do love that a lot. However, it did create a minor continuity error with Leia remembering Padme and that she was sad and it's like it was all true, but at the same time, it's like you're just born. Like, how is it that you have this memory, ingrained in your head? And it's like, I guess maybe you could consider it, this was a feeling that she got in the Force that was just kind of imprinted in her mind, like just at the height of such
classic. Yeah. Classic Star Wars fashion.
Right.
It doesn't make sense, so we use the Force to explain it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it was a missed opportunity not to more fuller explain, I guess, in the moment. But then again,
yeah, I remember riding the school bus
yeah,
after Revenge of the Sith came out and like talking with other like 12-year-old kids. Like, it doesn't make any sense. She was just born. How would she know what her mom looked like?
Yeah, it's like at the same time though. At the same time, it's almost like I don't want those little like, I don't want those little kind of like things that just try to make sense of it. It's almost like better left unsaid and unfixed than. And again, it all goes back to how the movies were made in the particular order it was made, and it just is what it is at that point, right? When you start off halfway through a series and then make the rest of it later. Here's
so true.
Yeah. Here's one. Here's one. Just a throwaway one. We haven't had Rada, Jabba's son, show up in any Star Wars content since the Clone Wars theatrical release back in 2008.
He was utterly vanished.
Just vanquished, man. Like just.
Oh man.
Nothing else. I think
I think I know what happened.
He may have had one tiny cameo appearance, or maybe not. I don't even know. In the Clone Wars show, but it was mostly just a theatrical release.
I don't know if this is still canon, and maybe I'm misremembering, just like Leia. But at one point, I believe I read that Hutts, they actually eat their offspring to keep them from growing up and overthrowing them.
Ooh.
So I don't know. I don't know if that's what happened, but it's possible. This isn't like a
So
a
you're
joke
saying
I'm making because
saying,
Jabba's a
like-
big guy.
Well, he was
but it's
making
possible
the-
that he just ate him.
he was making deals like big galactic wide kind of space lane kind of deals with making allies and stuff just to get his dinner.
He wanted the honor. Maybe it's like a special delicacy.
Maybe, I don't know. It's like is it really worth the trouble? But yeah, you're
I'm
right.
gonna look this
actually.
up because I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere.
That's crazy, man. Like honestly, like it's not far from like I'd be willing to buy that, but at the same time, it's like that's a little harsh. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, you see, like this adorable kid. Maybe that's why they never finished the arc.
Maybe. Yeah, Rada, for any of you guys who don't know, haven't seen Clone Wars, Rada is Jabba's son. He had a brief appearance in one of the Clone Wars theatrical release films, the one that kicked off the series. And then in the Clone Wars show and beyond that, in more recent forms of Star Wars, canon, books, comics, whatever, he's like not made any kind of appearance, which has been a little strange to say the least, because he was such a big plot of that first story. You'd almost expect something to come about it. So I'm kind of waiting on Dave to kind of do something about this. Maybe in Book of Boba, when we had those twins show up, which were cousins of Jabba, how great would it have been? It's a bit of a missed opportunity there not to have used Rada in his place, not to use this young Hutlet who's now kind of grown up. I don't know how quick they grow, but coming in to try and take his father's legacy, right? Like there would have been some sort of personal connection there in the story.
I believe the Hutts age super slowly though, so he might still be really young.
Right, it might have been.
Not to say that necessarily rule him out. He could be like some unruly teenager.
That could have been kind of funny to see, though, kind of interesting, like seeing this like little Hutlet prince like being heavily guarded by all these like bodyguards and stuff, and it's like, the thing is like the size of your coffee table.
And he could have like the kind of like that emo hair where like it's really long on one side and covers his one eye, and the other side shaved.
It's like something out of Star Wars Visions.
Yeah, exactly.
I think would you say it's a bit of a missed opportunity not to have used him in that series? Or
I've done something with him because like he just kind of vanished.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always thought it was a missed opportunity for sure. Them not using him at all. Do you have pulled it up there or can't find it?
I can't find it at the moment, so maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe that's something like I heard it like middle school, and I've just always considered it canon. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
But I did hear that at some point.
I'll move on to the next one then. Snoke as Plagueis. And
that's my biggest one.
Having no Palpatine return. Okay, yeah, I'm getting to the bottom of my list now too, and this is a big one. I know it's another sequel one, but not just making Snoke Plagueis was, I think, the biggest disappointment of watching where that trajectory was headed. Because I know we've gone on a rant already about the initial trajectory of the stories. But just accepting the movies the way they are, if you just take episodes 7 and 8, why not, right up until the point where Snoke gets cut in half, that is, why not just make him Plagueis, Like, it's like, how much of a troubled, how troublesome is it to really kind of do? Because do we care about this character? Kind of, but also not really, because we haven't really had any time to experience that character. Then again, I don't want to make him a throwaway character, but if they just increased his villainy, made him the villain of the story, and just kind of rolled with that, they could sell us on him being Plagueis and had no I don't know, like inconsistencies in the story, right? Because like I know that
I get what you're saying, because like a big complaint is Snoke came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But if they went with Plagueis taught Palpatine and is referenced in the prequels. So he's a character that already exists in lore and would make complete and utter sense to be the final villain. Not only that, but we're left with this unambiguous idea that he conquered death.
Right. Exactly.
So we could have had the exact same story that we got, but replace Snoke with Plagueis, and then even if we keep the fact that Kylo cuts him in half, he could, because he can keep himself from dying, come back and be Palpatine, and then we don't have to bring Palpatine back, and that also would make people a lot happier.
Exactly.
Because then they'd be trying to kill this guy who's unkillable.
On top of that, in the books right before Episode 7 came out, the Aftermath trilogy and kind of beyond, in some of the more recent Thrawn novels, before Episode 9 came out, that is, and such, new forms of canon had consistently kind of been playing up the fact that Palpatine sensed something dark in the outer regions. And I always thought, oh, it's Snoke, right? Like, he's sensing this dark being out there, right? Until we found out in Episode 9 where it threw us like a curveball. And it's like, oh, actually, Snoke is just a product of some failed cloning experiment or whatever, right? Still don't even know the whole science behind that. But, until that point, it's like, I thought that Palpatine sensed Snoke, in which case Snoke could just be Plagueis because, maybe he's hiding. Maybe this whole thing, if he was just Plagueis, it would have also really, really played up the fact that Sith Masters use their Sith apprentice to just get where they need to be, right? We've seen it happen a million times. It's the whole history of the Sith is, will the apprentice overpower the master and become the new master and take on an apprentice of their own? Or will the master eventually succeed their apprentice in their failed attempt at taking over them, as a master, and then they just find a new apprentice, right? Like,
exactly.
Sidious
or they killed him some mission or whatever.
Yeah, and we saw it with Sidious using Maul, then using Dooku, then using even Grievous and Vader, of course, like wanting to replace Vader with Luke, and it's like it just goes on and on. It's like, how great would it be if Plagueis had actually made Sidious think it was the ultimate deception scheme, made him think that he actually killed him even after telling him the secrets of how to resurrect himself and all this stuff, right? And like Sidious is all happy after they make this whole grand plan to take over the galaxy together, and then he's actually still alive, brings himself back in hiding, waits until Sidious has actually done all the gritty, dirty work of getting them to that place, and then he comes back, after Palpatine's been gone, after he knows that the Chosen One exists, he knows that the Chosen One's fulfilled the prophecy, killed the Sith, died, right? It would make sense for Plagueis to have this greater plan that superseded the plan that he had with Palpatine, just to come back into play. And then it would have brought so much more relevance to the First Order, because then it would have made sense why there's a second duplicate empire that's been building in the unknown regions this entire time, right?
Yep.
Big missed opportunity.
No, I agree.
Man.
I know.
Like the biggest one.
Even if you don't go that route and you just go the route that Palpatine betrayed him, and so then Plagueis went and rebuilt his own empire to then, pick up where Palpatine left off, right?
Yeah.
Like there's so many ways you could make it work.
Yeah.
And they really just didn't do it. And it doesn't make any sense to me. And I think it's honestly the biggest missed opportunity of all. And it ties all 9 films together.
Yep, it does. And it would have just made so much more relevance out of so much stuff, and it's like, man, that would have actually, and then Rey's entire storyline, of course, would have changed because now she really is no longer Palpatine at all. She ends up just being what Episode 8 made her out to be, as a nobody, and then she could be becoming a somebody.
And then the irony would be that Palpatine's daughter then overthrows the master that manipulated Palpatine.
Maybe something like that, right? Yeah.
Even that works as a good storyline too.
Yeah, that still works better.
Every way you approach it, it's a good story, and it makes more sense than what we got.
Yeah, I don't think there's a scenario in which Plagueis being Snoke is a bad story. Like, I think it's always a good result at the end of the day, It's always a good result, like, no matter what you do.
Yeah. Like,
and like most people don't know Palpatine's first name is Sheev. It's Sheev Palpatine, right? Most people don't know that's his first name.
Shivi.
Snoke. I mean, who's to say that Snoke isn't just Snoke Plagueis? You know, like whatever. I don't know. Like, well, Plagueis is
his
Darth,
middle name.
Plagueis is his Darth name, I guess. But like, who's to say that Snoke just isn't his actual name, right? Like,
It's true.
Chief Palpatine is Darth Sidious. Darth Plagueis could have been Snoke something, right?
Well, his real name is Snake Smoke, but he goes by Snoke.
Snake Smoke.
That's right.
But yeah, that I think has got to be probably the biggest one on this list.
Yeah, I know you were saying that not using George's scripts, which is big too, but if we don't want to go from that meta approach, for me, it's this one.
Yeah.
This is like the biggest thing, and
Yeah.
it's not even that big of a change, but it makes a massive impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got 5 more, which I'm just gonna run through real quick. Actually, 6 more. Okay, Revenge of the Sith / Episode 9 could have been way longer. Being the last movies at the time that thought were going to be the last Star Wars movie, why not just pull out the whole card? You know, pull out the deck. Just throw it on the table. Make a 3-hour Star Wars movie. Why not? Right? Like, what do you got to lose? I mean, Avengers Endgame did it. Avatar did something close to that. I know Lord of the Rings, like they made those movies to be extended and then cut them for theatrical. Why not just make a 3-hour Star Wars movie? I just don't get it. Like 2.5 hours.
It basically did with Episode 8.
They kind of neared 3 hours there with Episode 8. It's still not exactly 3 hours, but I mean, Episode 9 and Episode 3 could have benefited greatly from the extra screen time if they just made. This is both on George and Disney, you know, with both Episode 3 and 9. I know a lot of people feel Episode 3 feels like a little too stacked, you know, a little too busy. There would have been a lot more time.
It's interesting. Like, I just rewatched it, and there's a lot of nothing in the middle. Like, there's a lot of them just like
it's politics stuff,
walking around. Yeah, but especially
it's
hanging
story
out
stuff,
in,
right? It's story stuff.
in Padme's apartment. I feel like it drags a bit because they're just like talking, and then they sit, and then they talk, and they stand up, and they walk, and they talk, and then you go back to the Jedi Council, and it's the same thing.
It's
you just cut back and forth between the two.
It is, and it's crucial stuff. It's not to say that it shouldn't be there, but I get what you're saying. I think like if it was longer though, they would have been able to mix it up a bit better, right? Just so that it's not like action in the start and then action in the end, right? And it would have been able to be a bit more mixed up a little bit, and I think it would have been beneficial for each of those movies. Even if we just take Episode 9 as it is, just take it as it is, right? How much better could the movie have been if it was just longer, right? By like an extra 15, 20 minutes, right? The opening could have been not crammed like a sock drawer with, you know, a million things inside of it, right? All the whole Ben Solo finding the Wayfinder, going to Exegol, confronting Sidious.
Yeah.
That all happens in like 3 minutes or something like that. It's just insane, man. It's insanity.
You know what's funny is that really correlates to something that hit me last time I was watching A New Hope. And that is the fact that modern films, they try to cram in way too much stuff as opposed to having less things but adding more drama in the scenario.
Yeah.
And absolutely. I think it really, really hurts modern films, especially stuff like Episode 9.
Yeah.
Where then everything just feels convoluted and rushed and too coincidental.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? I mean, like a lot of people might make the argument, well, I don't want to sit there for 3 hours. And, you know, my retort to that
depends
is,
if it's a good movie.
If it's a good movie, it doesn't matter how long you're sitting there. People sit in a stage plate for like 4, and like, yeah, there's like a 30-minute intermission or whatever, but I mean, you know, you're there for the story, and it's an experience. And if we're talking about a movie that you're enjoying for the sake of a story and an experience, a lot of people would go to the theater and call that the experience, right? Why not, right? Like, why not sit there for 3 hours? I thoroughly enjoyed Avengers Endgame. Sitting there for 3 hours. It's like I could sit here for another 30 minutes, you know, like without needing to go to the bathroom. And I watched Zack Snyder's Justice League, which I was not a fan of the theatrical Justice League movie that came out a couple years ago. And seeing Zack Snyder's version, mind-blowing, man. It was so much better. And it's a 4-hour movie. It's got like four
Dang.
parts to it. But dude, it is so perfect with I guess it just kind of made the previous two movies in his trilogy so much better because of that movie. And it was just the length of it. There was so much room to tell good story, right? It wasn't just action stuff. I mean, there was a lot of action in there, but it was just good story content that made the movie itself better. And if I wanted to see an action movie just for the sake of a long action movie, go see Transformers, right? Like that's a perfect example of long
You don't
action
care about
movies.
the story.
Yeah, you don't care about the story anymore, right? That's just
You just want
Transformers, Teenage
cool
Mutant Ninja
action,
Turtles.
robots.
Exactly. I mean, we're looking at the length of a movie and a good story, it comes down to length and how much stuff we're packing into it. And if you're packing into like a 3-hour movie into 2.5 hours, it just doesn't work. And I think that's what episode 9 did. And episode 3 could have benefited a little more with extra time.
A big reason for that is because they had to quickly scrap together and explain a new villain.
Yeah.
For the big close, which if they had done Plagueis, we wouldn't have had this issue.
Exactly. It all plays into each other. All these missed opportunities, they all play into each other. A New Hope lightsaber physics. So again, this kind of goes back to just how the movies were made in the order that they were. But after episode 4, the idea of a lightsaber being really heavy was just changed out of out of left field. Now George wants fast motion samurai style stuff and not heavy broadsword stuff. And this just kind of is a repeating issue even in recent forms of Star Wars with the Darksaber and the Mandalorian. And we've just seen this concept of a heavy lightsaber come up every now and again. And it just it's one of those inconsistencies where it was a missed opportunity in the special editions, maybe not to do something about it. Or I know there's that SC-13 project that redid the Ben Kenobi Vader fight, which is fantastic.
Yeah, they did a great job.
Yeah, really good job. Not to say that I don't think George would have gone as far as replacing a whole fight scene like that in that kind of format. I don't know if I would have had a problem with that or not, but like that level of change is kind of like next level. But I just wanted to throw it in there. It's almost a missed opportunity not to kind of do something
modernize
about
it.
Yeah, just do something about it. It's just one of those things that always nags at me when I'm watching that movie.
Yeah. Well, another reason why it was so slow and clunky is because when they filmed that, they were actually starting with practical effects.
Right.
And so the lightsabers that they had built were super delicate. There was a kind of like a flashlight at the bottom, and then the lightsaber blade was a rotating mirror, so you get like this flashing kind of look. But when they dueled, they would break and shatter really easily. And so I think that's why you get a lot of that kind of like tapping movements.
That's why they eventually switched to the stick with the foil on it. Because that ended up just
like the green screen or whatever, and they just replace it later.
Yeah. Here's a curveball one for you. Mandalorian. In the Mandalorian season 2 finale, we had a missed opportunity when Luke shows up out of the elevator and takes down all those dark troopers. Missed opportunity with no John Williams, Luke binary sunset theme, no Force theme, no nothing. We just had an all original new song, which played when Luke was taking down all the droids. And I just always thought how much better that scene would be if we had Luke's theme, or something kind of close to that.
I get what you're saying. I think I know why they didn't, is they didn't want to reveal that it was Luke yet.
Well, it's when he's already got the lightsaber out, like in the hallway. That is not like before the elevator, but then when you get to the elevator, there's like there's you know what? Let's just let me just bring it up here. So there's a scene where he approaches in the X-wing. You kind of know it's him. They haven't confirmed it. And then as soon as he brings up the lightsaber, it's like you know it's him, right? And then the music kind of starts, but it's not the same song I'm talking about. It's like a different kind of thing. And then there's a build up, And then when he exits the elevator and starts hammering out all these droids, that's when the new song starts. And it wasn't the song I was expecting. So let's just take a quick listen. So this is X-Wing approaches.
X-Wing.
One X-Wing? Great. We're saved.
Incoming craft, identify yourself.
All right, so the X-Wing parks, docks in the hangar. Let me just flick forward a few seconds here. Okay, so we get this nice kind of like, you know, this soft choir kind of music. And you see
Surprisingly
this,
peaceful.
yeah, you see this cloaked figure kind of walk down the halls, and then you see him pull out a lightsaber. And on the video camera, you see him take down all these droids, right? And Bo-Katan's looking at the video screen. And then you confirm the green lightsaber color. It's gotta be Luke Skywalker, right? The robot hand comes out. You know it's him. Alright, now I just flick forward to... Alright, so he gets in the elevator. And now we're in the hallway. Now you see the Dark Troopers turn, face the elevator, start marching towards it. You know he's coming. Big suspenseful moment here. Alright, here we go. Here we go. Door's about to open. You see the lights on the elevator door flashing. More suspenseful shots, close up of the heroes' faces. Silence. And then the song starts. Right? You hear that?
Yeah. Doesn't sound like Star Wars.
No, it sounds like a theme that they might play for Grogu.
Right. You know what? To me, it sounds like James Bond.
Yeah, it kind of does a little bit. Okay, so there's
Would that be all, Miss Moneypenny?
Yeah, there's a YouTube video that someone made with it's called Luke's entrance, but with the Force theme. And
Okay.
I just want to play just a sample of that, just so that you get the idea of like what I'm talking about, what it could have been, missed opportunity of what they could have done with this particular scene. All right. Okay. All right. Elevator's about to open. They changed all the music. And doors opening now. There you have it. There's a re-edited scene with the Force theme, and it's just, I don't know, to me it just kind of works, you know?
It feels more Star Wars-y. I feel like they should have toned out the Mandalorian music. It started to feel a little convoluted, but as far as picking out just the Force theme, I think it did make it feel more like Star Wars, and probably is the more fitting for Luke.
Yeah, it's like you get this heroic Jedi moment where he shows up. It's like that's the kind of music that we think of when a moment like that happens, right? So it's funny that already that's already a thing on YouTube. You know, you can find multiple different variations with differently edited music, but that to me was like a big missed opportunity in Mandalorian. Rey's lightsaber rebuild. So this is my second last one on the list. Not the biggest thing in the world, but I always thought that them bringing back the Skywalker saber consistently was just stupid. I love that lightsaber. I love Anakin's lightsaber a lot. When they destroyed it in Episode 8 after a whole movie of multiple characters just going after this thing, I was like, thank goodness that's just over with, you know? No more, that lightsaber, it belongs to me.
Yeah. I like that part, actually, of Episode 8. I thought that was a really creative idea, and I feel like it was one of the few times that I was, what's that saying Ryan Johnson always says?
Surprised?
No, it's a different word he uses, but yeah, basically, it was very unexpected, and I was actually happy with that.
Taken
decision.
by surprise,
What's that?
yeah.
No, there's like a saying he says all the time. Oh, I'm blanking on it.
All right, well, it's a moment that to me it was good. You know, it was a good part of the movie.
Subverted expectations.
Yes, it subverted expectations, right? And it's like it was a good part of the movie. It's like I liked it when the Kyber crystal, you know, just freaks out, blows up. You know, Hilton 2 at the end of the movie, she pulls it out. You see a clear kind of that thing is broken. And in the follow-up movie, Episode 9, they ended off the movie with her own lightsaber, but I would have actually loved to have seen her wield that yellow thing throughout the whole thing, because it actually gives her like her own kind of place, you know, her own identity as a Jedi, using her own stuff. Now she's been learning the ways of the Force. It just kind of made sense, and it would
should have got it an 8. Yeah,
and it would have, you know, if trying to, because I know the comparisons are made between the sequels and the originals, and them, you know, copying a lot of stuff, but one unexpected area where that didn't line up at all was Return of the Jedi. Luke has his own lightsaber through the whole thing, and he's not like a fully fledged Jedi until he takes on Vader again. But it was the same thing with Rey, right?
In the prequels, right? Like that they create their lightsabers before they're Jedi Knights.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not even Padawans yet.
Yeah, I mean, like Rey can float in the air and do all this crazy stuff, and like she still doesn't have her own lightsaber. Like, give me a break, you know? I mean,
and let's not forget for how long we speculated, and I think it should have remained the case that she should have had a staff saber.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And well, that in itself is like it's part of the original Colin Trevorrow Episode 9 script, which ended up getting canned last minute, and then they brought JJ back to rewrite the movie. But in the original script, which was done before Carrie died, that was actually a thing, and it's actually released in the concept art for the movie, where she's got this big staff with a little lightsaber blade and stuff, and it's like that's just so much cooler, you know. And
it would make it feel different than her just copying Luke.
Big callback to Episode 7 when she's swinging that big staff around all over the place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She already knows how to fight with that, so that would have made more sense than her learning how to fight with a sword.
Exactly. Instead, she just takes a chunk off the top and makes a lightsaber hilt out of it. But still, whatever the case is, saber staff or lightsaber pike or whatever you want to call it, yellow lightsaber, a Rey built lightsaber would have been much cooler for Episode 9 if we just take it as it is. I would have loved to have seen that instead of a fixed Skywalker saber. And then when she buries the lightsabers at the end of the movie, you know, she buries Anakin's lightsaber next to Leia's lightsaber. It would have been nice to at least maybe that's why she's burying it. Maybe, you know, it's like putting it to rest, right? It's a broken, dead lightsaber that no longer works. Leia's was fine, but you know, and then who knows what happened to Luke's green lightsaber? But that's like the ones that she buries in the sand outside of the Lars homestead. It's the Anakin's next to his daughter Leia's, and I always thought they should have just left it broken, you know. So last one on my list here, was it a missed opportunity to not have Jar Jar included in the special editions?
In the special editions? Like the original trilogy?
Yeah, in the original trilogy, was it a missed opportunity not to throw him in there?
What, like you're thinking when they go to like Moss Isley, and they come into the sand speeder. You'll be like juggling in the background or something.
I don't even know, man. Like, it was just something as I was throwing the list together, I'm like, I'm just gonna put this at the end. You know, people can either have a laugh at it or actually come up with something. But I don't know. I mean, like, it was like, I get why he's just not around at all in any movie after episode 3, but at the same time, I don't know. I mean, George loves that character so much. I'm surprised that there wasn't even like a background cameo thing going on.
Yeah, it's interesting. He didn't try to do something, or at least a Gungan.
Yeah.
What about this one? We don't know because it was only rumored. But if you look up the theory, I think there's legs to it. What about the missed opportunity of, because this is before Plagueis existed?
Yeah.
Jar Jar being the original Sith Lord who taught Palpatine.
Oh man!
And they just do a reverse Yoda gag, right? Where like when you first meet Yoda in Empire Strikes Back,
Yeah.
he's like this kooky, crazy character. And you find out he's a Jedi Master.
Yeah.
Same idea, but Jar Jar's a Sith Lord.
Man, that's a theory I don't think is ever gonna go away.
It's because it takes this character that everyone like hated his antics for, and then it makes it so he did it on purpose to trick everyone.
Yeah. No, it's it actually has a lot of foundation, I guess, beneath it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's not a thing that's gonna stick. But to me, I mean, even seeing a Gungan at all, like what you mentioned there about the Gungans showing up at all, like Gungan, yeah, Gungan. I mean, like, why not just throw one in any kind of Star Wars after the prequels, right? Like, it's like, did they all just get eradicated or something?
Yeah, they vanished. That's a good question, because we know they did that with the Geonosians, so maybe they did that with the Gungans as well.
Maybe. Be interesting.
I'm sure Palpatine hated them.
Yeah,
unquestionably, because they're from his home world.
Right. Yeah. Who knows? That'd be an interesting one to try and speculate on for sure. Man, Lego. I mean, Lego Star Wars has been out. We've had our review for that out for kind of a little while now, but about a week. But I followed up with I played episode 3 now at this point. And I gotta say, anyone who doesn't own Lego Star Wars should pick it up. It is such a good game. I know you mentioned you're gonna buy it as well. Yep,
I'm just waiting long enough that people start trading it in at EB Games, and I'll pick one up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, anyone who's listening, make sure you go and check out that episode because it was a good one, and really broke down the game for our progress on Attack of the Clones. But as far as missed opportunities go, that's pretty much the list that I've got. I think we covered everything on your list there as well.
I had a few minor ones, but we hit all the big ones. I could just quickly run through them here.
Sure.
I think it was missed opportunity that there was no existence in the sequels of Mara Jade or Kyle Katarn. They should have, even if they weren't main characters, they should have at least existed.
Right. Little nod to those Legends fans out there, yeah.
Exactly. And the other one is, I think, a missed opportunity using the Knights of Ren. They didn't really do anything.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one. Yeah.
And there was such a cool concept that just didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Recently,
they've been adding them in recently into stuff. So the new Crimson Reign comic book arc. And
that's the thing, though. It's all comics. It's not screen.
Yeah, exactly. For sure. I agree.
Yeah, but this ties in a bit with what you were saying earlier. This crossed my mind. You said how you didn't like the state of the galaxy when we come into when we come into episode 7, right? Yeah. So what if we back that film up a little bit in the timeline, and the Ben Solo prequel comic? What if the movie started there? Because then you would learn the Knights of Ren. Mm-hmm. You would see how Kylo becomes the master of the Knights of Ren. You'll be introduced to Snoke or Plagueis, and you get to see the fall of Luke's Jedi Academy. and then from there, you would go into the rest of the story.
That would be so much better because, you know, I think definitely like there's a lack of material, I think, when it comes to the transition of Ben Solo into Kylo Ren, for sure. And that's what makes that comic book so good, because it fills a much needed space that they were intentionally trying to avoid when they were making the movies, because they didn't want to, I guess, do anything that would affect the stories later in the films, that is. So there was like one book which came out at one point called Bloodline, and it was about Leia in her political career between episodes 6 and 7. And that kind of did something, but it vaguely mentioned Ben Solo, and it just said that he was off training with Luke or something like that. And just gave you the idea. It's like, okay, he's born. They've kind of passed him off to, you know, Uncle Luke and, you know, for training.
Use the Force.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No mention of Leia's training or anything like that, of course, because at that time they hadn't constructed that part of the story yet. But and the Kylo Ren comic book was, you know, I think like 3 or 4 years away from its actual release. So this is going a ways back.
I don't know. They probably came up with that story afterwards.
Yeah.
So obviously it's not like realistic for them to have done it. But, you know, we're talking about like what ifs here, and I think that would have added to the story a lot. I think that would have been really cool.
Definitely, yeah, for sure. I think the biggest, one of the bigger missed opportunities for sure is definitely not approaching the sequels as a trilogy of films that are sequels, right? They approached them as if it was the middle of a story again, like how episode 4 and 5 and 6 did it. And that was, I think, one of their bigger mistakes when planning out that whole trilogy. They didn't use the backing of 6 movies to emphasize episode 7, right? They just soft rebooted the series and called it a day, which was a big mistake. But, you know, there you have it. Missed opportunities. You know, we have missed opportunities. We point out these missed opportunities because we love Star Wars, and, you know, we want to see it succeed. And there's things, obviously, all of us have something to say about what we think we would have liked to have seen instead of what we got. And there you have it. So, any last words?
Just had another one hit me here, and this one, maybe we'll get it, but the return of Mace Windu.
The return of Mace Windu. I think when it comes to Mace Windu, I think Samuel L. Jackson's probably in your boat as well. I think he's rooting for himself.
Yeah, he's ready to go.
Come back. Yeah, he's ready to go for another spin at the lightsaber. And
it's like Ewan gets a miniseries. Why can't I?
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I wouldn't mind seeing him back. At the same time, it would be kind of strange. It's just there was no alluded content at all that kind of tried to say he could be alive. It was just he's out.
Except George Lucas saying he's alive.
He said he was alive?
George Lucas said he's alive, yeah.
No way.
Yeah, I mean, it was there's like an interview, and like George is there and Samuel L. Jackson's there, and Sam just is like, "Hey George, you know, fall out window, Jedi can survive stuff like that. I can be alive, right?" He's like, "Sure."
I think at that point George is like, I'm not making any more Star Wars movies. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'll just make him happy.
All right.
Yeah.
Hey, came from the Masters, so it's got to be the truth.
Yeah, that's so funny. He backed him up into a corner with that one. Yeah.
Sure.
Can you imagine if he was like, nope.
I'd laugh really hard, that's for sure. That'd be a good interview. And then Samuel Jackson and give him that, like, you know, the Pulp Fiction face.
Yeah, totally.
Just that stone cold badass pissed off look.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks for coming back as always, and we will catch you in the next one.
Sounds like a plan, man. Remember, keep flying.
All right, and thank you all for those tuning in at home, in the car, in the kitchen, wherever you are. You can find Star Wars Escape Pod on any podcast platform, and don't forget, help us out. Give us some nice star ratings if you're on Spotify. or Apple Podcasts or Podchaser or anywhere that allows you to leave a star review, maybe even type a few words. It really helps us out a lot. Helps the algorithms, helps people find the podcast and get listening, I guess, get tuned into the show. So we always love seeing our audience numbers go up, and that would be fantastic. Next week, we've got something planned. You'll find out what it is later. Have an awesome Easter weekend, everyone, and may the Force be with you.